Welcome to the 21st episode of Ravanna Review, a program of stories, essays, art, and book reviews. My name is Robert Boucheron.
And I'm Rob Juronic.
We will be your host for a half hour of reading aloud with illustrations and author photographs. The print magazine Ravanna Review is published 4 times a year in Charlottesville, Virginia, on the Ravanna River. The magazine is available in bookstores on the Main Street Mall in Charlottesville and elsewhere in Virginia. You can order a copy or a subscription from the website, ravannareview.com. Contributors to the magazine live all over the world, and they write about places far and wide. This episode has a story set in San Diego, California, where a high school principal chases down a pickup truck. In another story set in Pence Springs, West Virginia, 2 men in a pickup truck tow a trailer load of calves. Essayist Jonathan Russell Clark tells about drinking in a bar in Boston and why he quit. Christy Bell in South Georgia goes deep into Waffle House and a book on the popular fast food chain. 2 book reviews by Robert Beauregard assess stories by Daphne Calote on midlife love, and a novel by Jenny Erpenbeck on a love affair in East Berlin under the communist regime. Story, The Pickup Truck in the Alley by Francois Berriot. At 3 in the morning on a misty March Saturday night, something outside her house exploded, sending Cassie Jasper off the couch. Between the couch and the floor and sleeping and waking, she bit her tongue and came to full consciousness with a mouthful of blood and a throbbing funny bone. She spat the blood on the floor and jumped up to look out the window, before considering this might be a bad idea. Tires squealed, and she saw the taillights of a pickup truck drive away from her house. She squinted and saw that her car was no longer parallel to the curb as she had parked it. It was also not separated from the neighbor's car in front of it. The police arrived half an hour later. In the interim, Cassie had gotten her 11-year-old twins back to sleep, talked to her husband Warren through their bedroom door. He was on his second bout of COVID and quarantined in the room. She applied a baggie full of frozen peas to her swollen tongue and brewed coffee. The 2 San Diego police officers were both men who looked to be in their late 20s. The shorter one, Gomez, was familiar, former student. After they had circled the car and taken the obligatory notes, her car probably totaled, the neighbor's probably not, they sat at her kitchen table. "You have any enemies?" Gomez's partner asked. "Not really," Cassie said. "Not really? Well, I'm a high school principal, so there's that." The 3 looked at one another. "Maybe I'll take that coffee," Gomez said. On Monday morning, Cassie sat at her desk, trying to focus on the latest district email. She could hear the nails of her administrative assistant, Arliss Wooten, as they struck her keyboard. "Arliss, when did I implement the no suspension policy?" "November 1st, the answer came with no interruption in the typing rhythm. "How many students did I suspend in September and October?" 3. Cassie chewed the end of her pen. 2 boys who smoked pot in the locker room. Harmless. Another who pulled the chair out from a classmate, causing her to fracture her tailbone. Stupid, but the kid had cried with what seemed like genuine remorse. "Arliss?" "Yes, Cassie." The typing stopped. "What about athletes?" "Athletes? Since my new rules, how many off the teams?" Cassie had managed to skirt district policy and institute stricter academic guidelines for athletes, causing bitter dissent within the school and community. Many argued that athletics was the only thing that connected the students to school, and she had received more than one vaguely threatening voicemail. Still, she stayed firm. A second semester senior was 1D away from not graduating, and she'd seen too many of those. But the girls' basketball team benched 2 starters and failed to defend its league title. The calls came in steadily. "About 11, Arliss said. She knew it was exactly 11. Arliss had an unstoppable memory. "Can you get me their addresses?" Cassie left school an hour later, 24 emails left unanswered. She plugged the addresses Arliss had found for her into her GPS. Her school was an educational complex of 4 themed small schools that served as a district magnet, and the 11 locations covered a large swath of San Diego. She picked 2 for today, both in City Heights, a diverse neighborhood where Vietnamese dentists in Little Saigon sat blocks away from Ethiopian restaurants in Little Mogadishu. She steered the rental car onto the freeway, accelerating clumsily, the car decidedly not hers. She took the next exit and pulled over on a side street. The blonde wig was ridiculous from a long-ago Halloween outfit. She paired it with equally dumb, oversized sunglasses she'd gotten at a White Elephant. She could barely stand to look at herself in the sun visor mirror, but it was probably enough. Glitzy theme parks and self-promoting slogans aside, the heart of San Diego beats in its alleys. Alleys with sandy footprints behind surfer shacks leading to the beach. Alleys connecting urban thoroughfares behind taco shops, wafting carne asada fumes. An art-filled alley running between 2 churches where a larger-than-life Aztec warrior stares at a series of stylized neon stick figures. Cassie found the first address in an alley which looked about the width of a car and a half. She should have parked, but her signature yellow running shoes would give her away. What was she doing?
Story, Pinch Springs, by Rob Juronic. That's me. Steve lived in one day to the next in a rural place defined by a 2-lane road in southern West Virginia. Part of America discarded as flyover country, Pinch Springs barely rated as drive-by country, and yet Steve had lived here his whole life, 75 years, never graduated, never married, never confirmed, never affirmed. Steve was 100% homegrown. He was a handsome man who wore a cowboy mustache. Illiterate and innumerate, he'd grown up the youngest in a family of 4 children. I believed I could detect in him a youngest child syndrome, as if his older sisters and brother kept a distant watch on him all his life. From a mile down the road, he'd come to our farm every day for over 40 years to work, always a little after 8 a.m., as if slightly late for a shift. Most days he'd appear in freshly laundered clothes, his shirt tucked in a belt strapped firm around his waist. He brought his dinner, the midday meal, which was always a bologna sandwich with mayonnaise on white bread, a cup of pudding, and a pop. It sat in a cooler on the floorboard of his truck near a pouch of chewing tobacco, a spit bottle, rusty tools, and other detritus in a filthy cab. Steve had a sweet disposition and was well liked by the community, who saw him at the store or occasionally at the church or the 4th of July picnic. Though he couldn't write his own name, he was a welcome and trusted presence. When asked how he was doing, he most often replied,
"Oh, all right, I guess."
He rarely answered differently, unless he felt bad. Then he'd mumble unintelligibly before soldiering on, his hands in his pockets and his shoulders sagging. A quiet uncertainty marked Steve's life. While he lived independently, he never achieved self-confidence, though he was often quick to attempt a joke or share a laugh. To live with so little security, but also with the absence of fear or regret, is a state of grace few can know. To be unconscious of evil, imperceptive of envy or greed, to live unafraid and not know it, is to carry innocence like an unwound pocket watch. Steve's 1998 Ford F-250 was among those uncertainties. A faded and dirty powder blue body encased an engine and set of tires of untold miles. The truck endured a lifetime of being ridden hard and put up wet, yet its ignition rarely failed to fire. This morning, we had another massive ask of the old mule. We had a load of heifer calves to deliver by 10. We ran the heifers through the runway and into the trailer, and I shut the gate and went around to the truck's passenger side. The door opened like a screen door. I hopped 2 feet up and into the seat, and the door closed like 2 pieces of metal and a reluctant latch. A few minutes later, Steve got into the driver's seat and slammed his door. like a rusty shed. He turned the ignition and it exploded to life, shivered with rugged vitality, and roared like a furnace in a steel mill. 13 calves, 5 and 6 weight, rustled behind us in the rickety 18-foot trailer. Will we make it to the drop-off in time, I asked.
What's the name of the place?
Steve asked, one hand on the steering wheel, the other on the stick. Bain Morris, I said.
Is it in Wayside or is it in Linside?
Near Linside, I said. Same as yesterday, but we'll go another route. I looked straight ahead toward the road we needed to travel. We needed to get underway. Steve knew this country well, although he rarely described it through landmarks, the way someone less familiar could comprehend. Instead, his understanding stemmed from people he'd known who came from a place or who now lived there. Bain Morris wasn't someone Steve knew, and neither did I. We set out in the powder blue Hulk. Our destination was 35 winding, rural West Virginia miles away. The engine blasted as we turned onto the main road with 7,000 pounds of scared calves behind and began to run south along the road that paralleled the Greenbrier River. When we got to Talcott, the engine groaned in protest, and we climbed up and over Big Bend Mountain. It gasped and spat as we careened down the other side.
Essay, Fireside Chats by Jonathan Russell Clark. Early in 2023, the only bar at which I was ever truly a regular was torn down to erect a 9-unit apartment building. The number 9 is significant. As reported in a local newspaper in January, quote, Boston requires affordable units to be included in developments if there are 10 or more units, unquote, which, wouldn't you know it, is just over the number of units here. Officially, the bar was called J.J. Foley's Fireside Tavern, but to us it was just the Fireside. It shut its doors in March 2022, and the night before its closure, the regulars who were still around partied and reminisced and drank and threw darts and closed the place down, this time forever. I didn't recognize a single face. I also wasn't there, just looking at pictures on Facebook. I had not been to the Fireside in many years. I haven't drunk alcohol for more than 10 years. I quit when the Fireside was still my bar, which means it was my first and last bar, my only bar. Now it's gone. I wasn't really sad about it until I read Sam's Bar, a 1987 graphic novel written by Donald Barthelme and illustrated by Seymour Chwast. I came across a first edition of the book at a local used bookstore and bought it mostly because of Barthelme, partly because of Chwast, but not at all because of its subject. Despite going through a pretty intense Barthelme phase in my early 20s, when I still thought I was going to be a brilliant postmodern fiction writer, I never knew that Barthelme wrote a comic. I'd read many of his wild and experimental stories, some of which employed visuals like The Explanation and At the Tolstoy Museum. I'd read a couple of his novels and many of his critical essays, but I never came across the title Sam's Bar. The fact that the illustrations here are done by Seymour Chwast made the book even more enticing. Chwast, along with Milton Glaser and Edward Sorel, co-founded Pushpin Studios, a legendary graphic design firm in the mid-1950s. The title establishment is meant to represent, as the front cover claims, quote, an American landscape, unquote, so the narrative comprises snippets of conversations from the eclectic clientele lining the bar. For instance, Denise, a realtor, tells Edward, a writer, this wonderful bit, quote, Rupert was an executive with the Boy Scouts. He referred to the Boy Scouts as the movement. He believed in it. He was forever going on to what they called jamborees. He wore short pants there, short khaki pants. I'm sure it was all very worthwhile, but he didn't have the legs for short pants. Few men do. The knee is not my favorite joint, unquote. These witty excerpts are presented in a series of 2 shots that looked like this. The woodcut style is quintessential Chwast, who got a kick out of aesthetically wedding the past and present. Woodcuts have existed for centuries and evoke a sense of history, which makes using the technique to portray a bunch of barflies all the more poignant, as if Chwast wanted to concretize these unsung figures for posterity. They are, after all, a part of existence too. The tradition of sketchy line drawings, underground culture, and anti-mainstream attitudes pervaded the skate and punk scenes, and as a result, I associate this set of styles with my kind of people. Perhaps this is why I was particularly susceptible to Sam's bar. One moment unexpectedly sent me down a Peggy Sue Got Married level rabbit hole. As I'm reading Barthelme's pithy captions to Trust's drawings, I recall my own experience with barflies, especially the misfits at the fireside. The weird stuff I heard people say, the dumb arguments, playing darts a little too seriously, snorting coke in the bathroom, deep conversations hazily recalled the next morning, tons of complaining, even more flirting, becoming acquainted with Bostonians I would never have met outside of a bar, boisterous singing along with the jukebox and everyone else, the temerity, good and bad, that alcohol creates, the openness.
Essay, Greasy Spoon by Christy Bell. When I was asked to review this book, I jumped on it like grease on a flat-top griddle. I thought, oh man, I'm about to step off into the fluorescent lit world of late-night chance encounters and the associated magical realism of a gritty blacktop in Arkansas. I didn't yet absorb that it was a university press, fully cited academic treatment of the Greasy Spoon's place within the socio-cultural fabric of the American South, a combination so incongruous as to be hard to swallow. Consider this early sentence. Preliminary data from the 2020 coronavirus pandemic suggests the American South absorbed a disproportionate share of the fallout from COVID-19 due to a tragic interplay of historically undercapitalized medical infrastructure, high poverty rates, structural racism, and government officials at multiple levels of authority who fail to fully or expeditiously implement mitigation strategies to slow the virus's spread. Sir, this is Waffle House. Are you sure you want to do this? Ty Matajowski is an anthropology professor at the University of Central Florida. He includes a preface and introduction, plus a separate acknowledgments section. It took me nearly an hour to wade through his justification for writing the book. The length he goes to explain his intent means that these pages cover the same ground as the front matter. The author refers to his own earlier works as cross-references, which is perfectly proper, but it means the practice that the book commits the double sin of being wordy and repetitive. Even so, once I came to terms with what the book is and is not, I found it engaging. It was an opportunity to examine my own ambivalent relationship with the South. Matajowski defines the grounding concept of his work in the preface. He proposes to use the Waffle House chain, concentrated in the South, as a vehicle for examining Southerners' collective relationship with their regional identity, and more particularly, with the region's troubled past and the role it plays in that identity. He seeks to explore the extent to which Waffle House exemplifies and embodies the Southern imaginary, an idea shared by some in the region that the South is somehow special, separate, and better than other regions of the country. It's hard to reconcile the democratic accessibility of the subject with the language Matajowski uses to write about it. He carefully stakes his claim to an outsider status, citing himself as only a Southerner by default. He documents his first trip to one of the restaurants, an East Louisiana Waffle House in December 2008, as a baptism by fire, born by necessity, not by choice. While Matajowski proposes to examine the restaurant chain without reductionism, he succumbs to it at times, partly because he holds the Southern imaginary at arm's length and sniffs at it. This realization was enough to propel me into the warm, buttery bosom of a Columbus, Georgia Waffle House 3 days before Christmas. A socio-cultural phenomenon in and of itself. Lolo, my waitress, adjusted her reindeer antler headband and proffered the standard greeting, "What'll it be, sweetheart?" Then bellowed my order over the general den. She grabbed a broom and deadpanned, I got somebody's ride home here. Then she beelined for the jukebox, was unable to get her fiver to work, exchanged it with a Rodney, the gawky manager manning the cash register, and promptly broke my streak of avoiding All I Want for Christmas Is You and Last Christmas for the year with her first two selections. She redeemed herself with selection number 3, Dolly Parton's Hard Candy Christmas.
Book review by Robert Beauregard, The Archivists by Daphne Calote. Daphne Calote, author of such acclaimed novels as Russian Winter, Sight Reading, and Blue Hours, as well as Calamity and Other Stories, writes about moments of irresolution that surface as youth retreats. The Archivists deftly explores the insecurities of early middle age, the desire for intimacy, and the perplexity of life's possibilities. Eliana, in A Guide to Lesser Divinities, like many of the 30-something women here, is dissatisfied with her life, but she is not resigned. Opportunities have not been exhausted, and choices can still be made. The fearlessness of youth, however, has slackened. Eliana loves teaching Greek creation myths to her state college students, but a permanent academic position seems out of reach. Then there is the fatal comparison, quote, friends I'd thought no different from me, procrastinators with credit and debt and unpublished doctoral dissertations and boyfriends they'd eventually have to dump, were in charge of things that mattered, unquote. Further dampening her spirits, she cannot imagine her much younger boyfriend as a life partner. Lynn, in 3 times 2, is the same age as Eliana and in a similar situation. Although her dissertation is unfinished, she has been offered a lectureship position at a college outside Boston. She thought her boyfriend, now living in Germany, would invite her to live with him, but this hasn't happened. In fact, she's not even sure she would accept. Lynn suspects she is at a critical moment in the trajectory of life, but is unsure as what to do. Incommunicable, Marlowe feels as if a settled life is eluding her. Having fled the city to avoid the pandemic, she is living in the country with her new boyfriend. She wonders where this might lead and whether it was presumptive to invite him to join her. Marlowe realizes all too well that she is no longer of an age where this arrangement can be considered expedient. Age, as a theme, runs through most of these stories. In The Archivists, the story that gives its title to the collection, Bryn, a retired ballerina at age 68, teaches a much younger dancer a challenging piece that, years ago, was choreographed specifically for her. The moves are difficult and the limitations of aging are apparent. Quote, she has promised her doctor to do nothing that will in any way strain her bad knee, unquote. Later, knee popped, Bryn writes to the fans of her blog. The anxieties of aging figure most prominently when single women are dating younger men. Eliana is seeing Luis. I was afraid of so many things, the precariousness of love, the capaciousness of Venus and Cupid, and of course, our unfortunate age difference. In the story Providence, Talia always assumed she would eventually find a companion for the long haul. Instead, here she was, on her own. Yet she refuses to acknowledge her next-door neighbor and friend Gordy's romantic interest in her. Consider the age difference. Talia is 45, he is 28. By writing about self-reflection without allowing her characters to slip into self-pity, Calote encourages her readers to empathize with their insecurities. These are wonderfully crafted stories.
Book review by Robert Beauregard. Kairos by Jenny Erpenbeck. Jenny Erpenbeck's new novel is constructed like a matryoshka doll inside the German Republic of the late 1980s. Ruled by Erich Honecker and the Ministry of State Security, lies Berlin, a city split by a wall dividing the communist East from the democratic and capitalist West. Within East Berlin occurs an affair, itself a type of love story between two people of quite different ages. A generational divide within an affair, within a love story, within a city, within a political regime. Confined in an adulterous relationship, and by an authoritarian state, Katerina, unattached, an aspiring student, age 19, and Hans, married for 26 years, a writer, age 53, work through their emotional and intellectual and sexual attractions. Erpenbeck, the omniscient narrator, tells of Katharina's remembrances years after the couple has parted. The affair had begun when the two met by chance, an event Katharina attributes to Kairos, the god of fortunate moments. Hans, whose adult life has been an uninterrupted series of extramarital affairs, immediately sets out to charm her. His wife and child away, they go back to his apartment and then to bed. When there is silence, where before there was sighing and lamentation, two bodies lie stretched out side by side in the dark. It will never be like this again, thinks Hans. It will always be this way, thinks Katharina, when sleep puts an end to all thinking. An affair of such pronounced age difference is destined to be short-lived. The younger person is eventually worn down by subtle paternalism and divergent expectations. Quote, before long, the time would come when Katharina irritation would start to outweigh happiness. The older married person will tire of youthful naivete, the endless deception, and strain of divided loyalties. Erpenbeck rescues the plot from cliché by setting it within the impending dissolution of the Soviet Union and infusing the relationship with Stasi-like surveillance. It's the late 1980s, and Hans, far from politically active, is dimly aware of the weakening of the communist state. His livelihood, however, depends on his earnings at the state's radio station. Katharina is less attached to the GDR. She has visited relatives in Cologne, in West Germany, and happily shopped for clothing unavailable at home. Passing through West Berlin, she tasted the freedom to wander anonymously. Katharina's professional ambitions lead to a dramatic event that stirs up the dominance and submission buried in the relationship and pervasive in East German life. During an internship at a Frankfurt theater, Katharina becomes sexually involved with one of her colleagues. Learning of this, Hans is furious and accuses her of deception and disloyalty. To recover what they once had, he proposes to make a cassette tape of his new understandings of her and demands she respond to every accusation in writing. The tapes become a medium for subjugation and debasement. One day, after she has her hair cut very short, she thinks, quote, now she looks like a sinner, like what she is. Hans met a nun a year and a half ago. Now a repentant sinner will fall into his lap, unquote.